What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Behind Enemy Lines, a Texas A&M football podcast. It is Arkansas Razorback week. A&M is headed back to Fayetteville for the first time in what feels a very long time, and there's a lot of things to talk about, so I had to bring in the big guns. I am here with Anthony Christensen from Whole Hog Sports. Anthony, appreciate you for joining me, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Excited to talk some football.
Absolutely. And obviously, the Southwest Classic here, a lot of rich history between these two programs. These games are always fun. The score hasn't always, in recent memory, gone Arkansas's way, but it hasn't been really indicative of just how back and forth these games have been. So, just from your perspective, when you think about playing Texas A&M every year, what is the vibe in Razorbacks, in the fandom when this game comes around every season?
I think for some of it at least has been, the dread of going to Arlington because they never had the luck down there. But now that the game is on campus, and I'm always kind of a proponent of, especially conference games being played on campus, I think that'll be a lot of fun. But I think people, in Arkansas territory are, they're still a little bit, I guess, disappointed with how the season has gone to this point. Obviously, the coaching change and everything, but I think everybody kind of gets up for a game like this. Everybody, is excited when Texas A&M comes to town, or any of those Texas schools really. But yeah, it's a game that has a lot of history, like you said, and I think people are going to be real excited, and Arkansas fans especially, getting this game back on campus at Arkansas for the first time in a long time. I know it was at Texas A&M the last time it was on campus, but to get this back on campus, in Fayetteville, I think people are going to be excited for.
Yeah, and with that comes, I mean, a lot of changes. When you look at this game at the early on set of the season, Sam Pittman at the helm, there's a lot of hope with Taylor Green that this team this season could be a little differently. Obviously, Sam Pittman's no longer there. Arkansas has had some struggles. Just what has been the vibe since Bobby Petrino has taken over, and just what is there new, optimism? Is it just let's get through the season? What is the vibe in Fayetteville right now?
I think it's kind of a little bit of people are excited that Bobby Petrino's back at the helm. Some people are. There's going to be a pocket of people who aren't as excited just with how things went or ended, I guess I should say, the last time he was in charge of Arkansas. But I think there's certainly people who are excited that he's back in the head coach's seat, at least in the interim basis. And then there are people who obviously, are just kind of like, let's get through the season and get through the coaching search and see where it goes. Bobby Petrino is, he wants to be a candidate for that full-time job, and he has the opportunity to earn it, especially when you look at, Arkansas's schedule for the rest of the season. And I think the game against Tennessee, I think, gave some people some optimism, just because, the defense did look better. There was some times where the offense looked really good, especially in the ground game. Obviously, Tennessee's defense has had some holes in the running game throughout the season, but there was some optimism there. So I think people are excited to see where it goes, that they can build on that. And I think it's a little bit of a mixture between some optimism between the people who are excited to have Bobby Petrino back at the helm and see if he can go and earn the full-time job. And then there's also the feeling of let's just get through the season and kind of see what happens with Petrino and the coaching search and whatever happens to the rest of the season. Oh, I can't
Sorry,
unmute
I was muted. Yeah, sorry. Speaking of
him.
that, defensively, just getting on the field here, it has been rough, right? Like you said, the defense showing some signs under Bobby Petrino to be better. But when you look at their bottom third in almost every important category, and obviously that may have played a little bit of the factor of why Pittman isn't there anymore. But what had been the issue? What are some of the things that you saw wrong with this defense, and some of the encouraging signs you said you saw against Tennessee? What were some of those things that were there?
Yeah, you asked what was the issue with the defense. I asked what wasn't the issue with the defense. It was just not to be disrespectful, but I mean, when you look at the Ole Miss game, it was all through the air. Trinidad Chambliss was tearing him up with his arm. Obviously he's a dual threat quarterback, so he can get on the move with his legs as well. But that game, it was almost like why would Ole Miss even bother running the ball when they're having so much success through the air? And then the next week against Memphis, it was why is Memphis even bothering throwing the ball when they're having so much success on the ground? And then the following week against Notre Dame, it was, wow, this defense can't stop anything. So it all kind of conglomerated and went into, that Notre Dame game where everything just kind of, I guess, came together and just fully collapsed. And then, yeah, like you said, I think that's why, Sam Pittman's no longer at the helm at Arkansas, and that's why they've had such a big shuffle with the defensive staff as well. As soon as, for Bobby Petrino's first day in charge, he fired the defensive coordinator, the co-defensive coordinator, and the defensive line coach, if I'm not mistaken. So you had all that shakeup, and then against Tennessee, there were some signs of life, I guess is the best way to put it. They got some stops, they forced some three and outs, and some of that was Tennessee kind of shooting itself in the foot, with some penalties and maybe going for too many big plays, back to back, or whatever it may be. But there were some times where the pass coverage was, it was good. They had some good pass breakups. There were some times where, on the ground, I thought was the biggest struggling area against Tennessee. But there was, a time from here and there. It's like, okay, that was good. That was good. But they forced 5 punts against Tennessee. I believe it was three and outs, which maybe not doesn't sound all that stellar to the outside ear, but when you look at what Arkansas had done throughout the season, especially against FBS opponents minus Arkansas State, that was probably their best defensive performance so far, which again isn't saying much, but there was some signs of life. I think my biggest question with that was how much of that is the motivation that maybe comes with the coaching change and a lot of reshuffling of the defensive staff. I'm a big soccer guy, so we call that the new manager bounce. So how much of that was the quote unquote new manager bounce versus how much of that was maybe improved scheme or improved whatever it may be. So I think that's at least one of the biggest storylines that I'm coming into this weekend's game with Texas A&M, just because obviously Texas A&M is Marcel Reed is a guy who can hurt you in a lot of different ways. So I'm intrigued to see if Arkansas is prepared for that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that you kind of I didn't have to ask this next question. So it's you're right. Like does it feel like it was just more of like you said the new manager bounce where everyone's playing inspired football and you look good and is it sustainable? And I guess the question will say like A&M comes into town, that's a prolific offense who can do different things. I guess it remains to be seen, but offensively it's been a different story. They've been able to make some plays. They've been productive. Taylor Green, obviously a quarterback that can do a lot of different things. Big body guy who can run, he can throw the football, and obviously we've seen it firsthand at Arlington last year. Like he can make plays down the field, and I think some of that is true still this year. And speaking of Bobby Petrino, A&M offensive coordinator in his history, coaching history, they know what he can do. They know what a Petrino offense is supposed to look like. So with that being said, all these changes on defense, not so much on offense, right? They haven't really had that many issues, and Bobby's just going to keep the thing rolling there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it. Taylor Green has been really good for the most part. There have been some times where you question the decision making. He's thrown into double coverage at times. I think there was a time I think he had two interceptions against Memphis. There was the first one I think was a little bit more excusable, but then the second one, if I'm remembering correctly, obviously that was a while ago. But the second one, it was like, okay, what was the thought process behind that one? So I think Taylor Green has been largely good, and he's been a reason why Arkansas has been in a lot of these games. And I think you've seen him better with his arm this year. I know he had some moments last year in which you could see it, that if nothing else, he had the potential to be a good throwing quarterback. This year he's built a really good relationship with Omega Blake and that receiving core. Obviously, Jalen Brown is out for the season now with a tib fib injury, which is tough for him. But you've seen him kind of, especially with just how new look, how fresh that receiving group was coming into the season, just having all come from all sorts of different places. I think you've seen, Taylor Green has really, built good relationships with those guys, especially Omega Blake. I don't remember exactly where he ranks in the SEC for receiving yards, but I think it's top 5 to 10, if I'm not mistaken. So those guys have built up a good rapport. And then Taylor Green, obviously everybody knows what he can do with his legs. So if the pocket collapses, he can get out of that. I think you saw that a couple of times against Tennessee. in which things started to go south, and he would ran off for a big gain and get a first down and whatever. And then there are other times where he had two fumbles against Tennessee as well, and he was going to throw but just didn't get it off in time and didn't get the throwing motion off enough to where it would have been an incomplete pass and it was a fumble. And I think Tennessee really only made Arkansas pay on one of those turnovers, but still, I mean, that's an opportunity lost on offense. But I mean, the offense has, I mean, it's explosive, especially in the running game, and I think that's a credit to not only Talon but Bobby Petrino as well. Obviously, he has the reputation as a being one of the best, if not the best, play caller in the game. So I think that's a credit, and for a lot of these games, it's been a question of how long can Arkansas's offense keep them in it, because of how much the defense has struggled. Against Tennessee, it was and there are question marks about the second half. In the third quarter, you saw Arkansas kind of put up a blank, and that's when Tennessee put up its. I think Tennessee, if I remember correctly, led by as many as 17 points, and Arkansas just barely couldn't make up for that. And part of that was the decision to go for it on 4th and 4 instead of taking I think a decently long field goal, which Bobby Petrino said post game that he had regretted. But the offense can get them back into games, it can keep them in games, and it can win them games. The question, I think, is how much can they carry the defense if the defense isn't as improved as maybe it maybe appeared.
That's
Sorry.
a no, that's great. No, I love this. No, that's good. I would say the only question I have here, to kind of circling back, is you talked about motivation. We talked about playing well for your new coach and stuff, but how much did you see? I don't know if you got a sense for that. Was that in play this last week, right? Obviously, a close game. They're able to battle through. Did you see a team that played more inspired football? And if so, is that something you see can carry over to, you put a name on a game, obviously there's more juice on it. When it's the Southwest Classic, you feel like there's more oomph to it. So this team, obviously the season didn't go they want to, but are they finding little micro reasons to go up and get up for games? And have you been able to check and see that?
I think so. I think so. Obviously, I think some of it does come down to a difference in personnel who's leading them, like we mentioned earlier. I think some of it also maybe comes down to pride. Like, I mean, these are high level athletes who you know are playing at the highest level of college football, and some of it does come down to, okay, we're getting beat in all these games. Like, I want to go out and perform and show that we're not what our record says we are, which I know that you are what your record says you are, but I think that comes into play. And then Bobby Petrino, when he was introduced as the interim head coach, said that these guys are going to have to be motivated, whether it be to improve their professional stocks, whether it be to show that they belong at Arkansas for the next coaching staff, be it him or somebody else, or if they decide to transfer, they want to have good tape to show that they're ready for wherever that next step may be. So I think there are certainly external motivating factors for them. I think that you saw that a bit against Tennessee. And I think that kind of all kind of conglomerates into into, at least in that game, a better performance on the offensive side of the ball, especially when you look back at the Notre Dame game. I mean, that was just a complete disaster, all around. Um, so I think that all kind of came together and showed that, hey, when this team does play, well, they can compete with, some of the higher echelon teams in the country. So I think that's, they do have those external motivating factors, I think, for sure.
For sure. And to that point a little bit, obviously this answer is probably different when they're ranked and playing well and a lot on the line. But for people that haven't been to Fayetteville, right, and they haven't been to that stadium, what is that environment like? What is A&M players walking into and A&M fans who have never been there? Just obviously take it with a grain of salt because this year isn't going the way they want to. But what kind of environment is that on Saturday?
I think it'll be an excited environment. I think people are going to be, maybe, I don't know if rejuvenated is the right word, just because of the coaching change. And like I said, there's a lot of people who are excited that Bobby Petrino is back at the helm. So I'm sure there'll be some added, I guess atmosphere, just from that group of people. And I think people are, obviously, it's going to be people who are excited because it is Texas A&M and there's the rivalry aspect of that game and everything. And then, I think there's still things to play for, right? I mean, that yes, they are 2-4, but they still, in theory, can win some games and get to a bowl game. And Bobby Petrino in that situation, you would think would earn the full time job. So I mean, there's still things to play for. I look back to the atmosphere for the first quarter of that and Notre Dame game was awesome. It was stripe out. Obviously, it was an afternoon kickoff, but or an 11 a.m. kickoff. But I mean, when there's a big game in Fayetteville, people get up for it and people are excited for it. And I think that is I think you could see that coming up on Saturday. I think it'll be. I think at least at the start, it'll be an exciting atmosphere. People will be excited for the game, and what happens after that, I think is up to the players and the coaches. Are you going to lay down like you did against Notre Dame and have the stadium empty by the middle of the third quarter, or are you going to go out there and give them something to cheer for? And that's something that the players and coaches both talked about after the Notre Dame game. Like they didn't blame anybody for leaving that just because of frankly how bad it was. So I think there will be a good atmosphere to start that game, and then the rest of the game, it's up to the players and coaches to give people a reason to cheer and be excited.
So in the same vein, before I get you out of here, you want to give a score prediction, or do you want to see how this thing goes out? What do you think? I know it's early in the week. Peek behind the curtain. We're recording this on Monday, so what's your sense? How do you think it shakes? And obviously, there's a lot of people around here that get nervous. A&M 6-0, and everyone's picking them. It seems like every week it's like, oh, here's the week A&M loses. Florida's going to take them down. Mississippi State looks strong. Is Arkansas in the same vein? And do you feel that way, Anthony?
I think there's a world in which Arkansas can give them a game, and whether or not that's the world we're in right now is to be seen. Like we mentioned, Arkansas's offense can keep them in games. I don't know that they've played against a defense as good as Notre Dame or Texas A&M's, excuse me. So I'm intrigued to see how that plays out. If you're asking me for a prediction, I do feel like Texas A&M is going to win the game. Whether or not I don't know that I'm comfortable with a score prediction right now, just because we're so early in the week. I mean, Bobby Petrino is going to have his press conference in about an hour and a half or so. So that'll be fun, and we'll get some more insight into the team. But um, yeah, obviously it'll all come down to the defense again. I think if Arkansas's defense can find a way to be competitive against Marcel Reed and that really explosive offense that Texas A&M has, I think it can be a good game, an exciting game. Because we all know Arkansas's offense can put up numbers. Notre Dame game aside, I think we can just put an asterisk next to that one just because of how just south it went so quickly. Um, no, yeah, I will say I will go on record. Prediction is that Texas A&M will win, and I do think that both teams will put up points though.
Got it, man. I really appreciate it, Anthony. This has been great. Before we go, just please give people a shout out to where your work is at, where they can find you, and all the good stuff you're doing there.
Yeah, you can find me at wholehogsports.com. You can also find me at times on the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and places like that, but primarily wholehogsports.com. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter. You can yell at me on there, which I'm sure the preseason AP men's basketball ballot is about to come out, and I'm a voter on that, so I'm sure I'll have some nice comments in my mentions today. But yeah, those are the primary places you can find me.
Appreciate it, man. Hey, like I said, it was a great pleasure to have you. I'm sure I'll see you this weekend in Fayetteville, and I appreciate it, man. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.